Kouri Darden. I'm going to try and strip that last name for her and then she took that name from her husband and then she took everything from him.
Welcome back to a very special case brief, because today we have some of the key takeaways from my conversation with private investigator Todd Gabler. You remember him from the Kouri Richins trial, walking into court carrying a neck brace with a cane as he was recently recovering from a very serious spinal surgery. And yes, we talk about that in the interview, but there is so much more we cover, including those texts between Bryce and Eric. We talk about his cross-examination and something at the very beginning of cross that none of us knew that he had to make a decision about, and we will get into it for sure. Plus, he talks about investigating Eric Richins' hunting trips, Eric Richins' pattern of life, and why it was inconsistent with the defense theory. And of course, those text messages between Eric and Bryce and the moments on the stand where the defense is really trying to make more happen with those texts that just didn't make sense, and maybe why some of those texts were on the phone back in 2018, which was an explanation I did not see coming. You're looking at the jurors, they're looking at you, and then you get up to the witness stand. Do you notice if Kouri and her attorneys are looking at you, or were you kind of locked in on the prosecutor as you get up to start testifying?
Yeah, so I wasn't tracking the lawyers. I know the lawyers, I know who they are, I know what they're doing. I know, generally speaking, what's coming. My long career was on that side of the courtroom, so I get it. Kouri is eyes locked on me, and she remains eyes locked on me. I don't know if you get to see this from your perspective, but the eyes are trying to burn a hole in the back of my head with the laser beams that are coming out of her eyes, right? I'm getting this very intense stare from her. At one point, I think there was a break. I went back to the recording and I tried to locate this, but it doesn't show her face. It shows me smirking, I think. And what I'm smirking at is that I have returned her stare. After putting up with it through the direct and part of the cross, I just looked straight back at her. And it was this look. I know you did it kind of look, Yeah. And she looked down, her eyelids dropped and she looked down and her head dropped a little bit. And I saw that again when the verdict was read. But I also saw her thereafter not looking at me, looking everywhere else but at me. And I was grateful for that.
Court cameras did a pretty good job of getting back to her when she was mouthing things under her breath at some witnesses. There were times where you could see her saying, "What?" When Josh Grossman was on the stand, she was just eating snacks or whatever and putting on lip gloss. But there were moments where they cut away from your testimony to show her face, and you could see that she was looking at you. I didn't notice her looking at the jury based on what cameras caught as often as some other defendants, but we did frequently see her looking at the witnesses, and it sounds like that stare was more intense in the courtroom than cameras can necessarily account for.
Yeah, and I at one point I caught a statement and they were discussing, I think they were discussing whether or not to impeach me with some material regarding me stopped outside of her house watching her. So what happens there is that we do surveillance by driving by. I can see what lights are on, where they are, what cars are in the driveway. We don't stop. In a town like Francis, Utah, you're not long for the job if you're parked in a car in a rural area in Utah. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But right after that, she says, he's obsessed with me. That's what she's saying in the courtroom.
Oh My God.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm a private investigator. It's my job.
Yeah.
I'm not a girl. We're not obsessed with you. Oh,
Yeah.
that tracks from.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
what that's how she saw it.
Everything we've seen. Yeah. That tracks. Of course, it's not he's investigating me. It's not he's investigating the estate. It's not that there's this other case with 26 plus financial crimes. No, it couldn't be any of that.
Couldn't be any of that.
Why are you so obsessed with me? We should just get into talking about Cross a little bit more, because you get into court, you have the very normal direct examination with Attorney Bloodworth. The highlight for me as someone who worked in the court system was how profound it is that you've never testified on behalf of the prosecution, because you work as a defense investigator. You're like the investigating officer for the defense in most cases. So you're not going to testify. That's a pretty unusual thing that you're being called in that way. And that was a huge takeaway for me, that you were, your entire career, if you weren't working in civil and divorces, you were working as a defense investigator. So working with the prosecution must have been odd.
Well, it was odd, but it also gives me the ability to bring a perspective to the investigation, which law enforcement cannot do. I am interested in not just a fact, but I'm interested in the context around that fact. As an example, law enforcement may decide that any kind of controlled substance is illegal and you should be arrested and go to jail for it. But that's not really what the law entitles. There's more context, there's classification, there's more nuance, there's other things that go on. In this particular case, the difference was between THC gummies and fentanyl, right? So I think we can all agree that those are two radically different things. Just because they're illicit substances together, classified as illegal, that does not mean that they are the same. And so,
not at all. I was so sick of hearing about the THC gummies. I'm like, oh my God, give a gummy a break. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Totally irrelevant to this case. Had nothing to do with anything. The only reason why it was part of this case is that Kouri had suggested early on that the gummies may have been laced with fentanyl. That's a non-starter for me. First of all, because these are retail THC gummies bought in Nevada or Colorado. And so you're not going to see illicit substances in those because they're audited by the state regulatory authority. It would be very bad for business to have any fentanyl in those retail gummies. So that just didn't make any sense to me. It was just another way to distance herself from whatever was going on and to suggest that the victim had done this to himself, which is ridiculous.
It's preposterous. And I note that you said from Colorado or Nevada, not from Mexico, because you can easily go procure legal gummies with THC in them over the border from Utah in either of those two states.
That's correct.
As we're going through the cross-examination, my first question before I get to some of the areas that I hope we can expand on a little bit from the cross, because I still have questions, and my questions are like, ooh, I wonder if, and they're things that Attorney Bloodworth didn't follow up on, I think, because some of them are due to pretrial rulings and some of them are, he kept his case incredibly narrow and he wasn't going to chase down kind of the rabbit holes that the defense threw out there. He was incredibly focused. I, on the other hand, am very curious, but when you get into cross, had you had interactions with Attorney Nestor prior to this trial, either in this case or other cases?
Yeah, so right off the top, she says, we've never met, and my name's Kathy Nestor, and yada, yada, yada. And I knew that wasn't true, so I didn't know whether to correct her or not. I decided to let her have that one because I had plenty of other things to check her on. But I did meet Kathy and Wendy outside of that courtroom when they first got onto the case, when it went from RQN to them, Ray Quinney and Nebuchadnezzar, to them. I introduced myself. I didn't have to introduce myself to Alex Ramos because I worked for him. So I knew who Alex was. We said hey, and I've worked with the defense's investigator on other homicide cases, and so I didn't need an introduction with him. I introduced myself to Kathy and Wendy. And so I did know about their reputations, which was good in the state of Utah. They're both Rule 8 qualified lawyers.
Very experienced attorneys.
Yeah. I was surprised at the under preparation for my testimony. And overall, I would say that was the difference between me and Kathy. I was more prepared than she was. It's not that we were.
It seemed that way.
Better than the other, but I just think I was prepared.
She asked very narrow questions about Mexico. Yeah. And I believe asked you did not call or travel to Mexico as part of your investigation and stopped there.
Right.
Is there a reason you think that she stopped with such narrow questions?
Oh, most definitely. Because she had my reports on my investigation of the hunting partner in Nevada and that traveled with him to Mexico. Dude lives in Nevada. The outfitter company that Eric and his hunting partner used are in Arizona. I most definitely investigated those two entities in my attempt to discover if it was possible that Eric had acquired drugs while in Sonora, Mexico. And
so the parties are located in the U.S. and they traveled to Mexico to go hunting, which is why you wouldn't have called Mexico. And she knows this because she has your report.
Correct. She knows that I didn't call Mexico. She knows I didn't travel to Mexico. That would not be a fruitful investigation, primarily because I got the answers I needed out of, not the answers I wanted, the answers that satisfied the requirements of properly investigating this particular hypothesis. So the Mexico thing, I don't know, people who haven't been hunting or camping probably don't get this fully. But when you are hunting or camping with someone, fishing, you are close. They're
very.
You know everything your buddy is doing, okay? There's no, the bathroom time, the coffee, you know everything that's going on. Nothing is going to escape you like a drug deal for fentanyl. And there is no indication from the outfitter, from the guides, from Eric's hunting partner, who, by the way, was the last person outside of that house to speak to Eric Richins while he was alive. I was keenly interested in talking to his hunting partner because they had troubles getting their trophies back across the border, and he was cursing with his hunting partner at the outfitter who wasn't giving them their trophies. So that was the last.
See, the way it came in trial, it seemed as if he was upset with the outfitter and talking to the outfitter, not talking to his friend about what these dudes are doing. So he's talking to the friend about what they're doing because he's frustrated that they're not getting stuff back. And we saw the videos from inside Eric's house. There are hunting trophies in the home. This was a regular part of his life that I think Kouri would have well known when they got married. But the hunting partner, it's interesting that we didn't hear from him. I think if the defense really wanted to make much of that, this is a witness they could have easily called and chose not to. Because for the prosecution's like, Kouri killed him. We don't need to tell you who he was talking to that night. It doesn't matter. The defense was trying to make much of it and then didn't call the friend. That's wild. But of course, you're going to track it down because the hunting friend would be like, no, there was never a gap in time when we weren't together unless somebody was literally in the restroom. And even then you could hear that they were in there. That makes sense to me. You were able to talk to everyone in his life about him, coaching his kids' sports, which we heard about at the bond hearing about how involved he was, and find that his pattern of life did not match a pattern of somebody who was deep in an addiction, as the defense was trying to insinuate. But his pattern of texting also didn't insinuate that he and Bryce were in a relationship. Were you stunned that this came up on cross? I was shocked. I was shocked that they were trying to make more of those text messages. And it seemed like you were genuinely confused as to what she was even asking about with the sexting of it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can understand why she would misinterpret this conversation. What I can't say in the witness stand is hearsay, right? I can't spout hearsay.
Right.
If somebody told me that Eric had discovered that Kouri was going through his phone, and that she would come upon these texts, which occurred in 2018, by the way, a long time before the events in this case, and that he and Bryce both knew that she was going through his phone, would it make a little more sense now to you why these guys would be sending these explicit remarks back and forth?
Oh,
it was a gotcha. It was a gotcha joke. Like, it's clear at the very first message, which Nestor doesn't read. She doesn't read the whole sentence, right? I'm the one who reads it from the witness stand. And it totally changes the character of what that thing says. It says, I told her I'm bringing you home.
Right.
Which
it was that clearly seemed like a joke. And I've watched other high profile trials where defense attorneys have tried to have this gotcha moment. Yeah. And then you hear the whole text and it just falls so flat. And them trying to make a lot of those texts felt really gross to me on this side of the screen watching it, because you could see where they were going, but they weren't reading in the text. And if Eric was having this torrid, solicit affair and it was all in text, she would be reading those text after text after text and asking someone to answer for them. And she never did. Did you see or pick up what the jury was doing while this uncomfortable exchange was unfolding? Because I think your response was appropriate, and I believe they would probably be sitting there aghast.
I noted a couple of them were kind of smiling, and I thought a couple of them were trying to suppress a laugh themselves. I think men more so than women probably understand this kind of talk between men. These are two junior high school friends who somehow never grew out of junior high school in their jokes with each other. And that's all it was. I think it is exceedingly important when you're going to blame a victim, when you're going to go after the victim in a case, you better have a kill shot. You better have something that is solid. Yeah. Because if you falter, I think that it hurt their credibility. I thought it hurt the defense lawyer's credibility in this case. I think as I went back and looked at the rest of the trial, I think it was probably suffering when they got to this point, but this point really, really hurt them. And it was self-inflicted. It wasn't anything I did.
Oh, 100% self-inflicted. But it was a moment for me when I sat there, because we had heard insinuation about whether or not Eric was having an affair. And as they got to those questions, I'm like, has this all been about text with Bryce, where he and Bryce are I call it making butt, but they're butting heads with one another for banter. And it sounds like even more so that they knew Kouri was looking at the phone and were doing it to kind of say, see if you bring it up. Like, are you going to bring it up? Are you going to bring up what you read on the phone or whatever?
Yeah. I have no way of knowing for sure that that's what was going on, but I strongly suspect it.
Do you recall looking at that text?
I do.
You've seen this one?
I believe I have. It's a joke.
It's a joke?
It is. It appears to me to be a joke.
Did you see the text around this text?
I did.
So you have reviewed the text between Eric and Bryce?
I don't know. I don't know that this is a text from Bryce. I have no idea. This does not identify Bryce.
So
now identify anybody.
Now that you have your memory refreshed, do you remember seeing this text between Eric and another individual saying that Kouri and I are starting an open relationship tonight? Right?
It says, Kouri and I are starting an open relationship tonight, so I told her I'm taking you home.
Do you remember seeing a whole bunch of emails like this or texts like this between Eric and Bryce?
Honestly, no, I don't remember. Like I say, there were hundreds of thousands of messages in this case. I don't remember even 1% of them. as I look at this, I mean, it just makes me laugh. It doesn't appear to be serious.
So how many of these joke sextings did you review that Eric did?
I don't understand this to be sexting. I think you're wrong about that. I resist your characterization. These are two friends joking with each other. That's what I'm reading here.
And they did that all the time?
I don't know.
Hundreds of times?
If I had the records, and then I could answer your question, but I don't remember all of these messages. And yeah, this is a joke.
Lawnard, I know you have been loving the Lawnard Shop, and me too. But what you might not know is that the Lawnard Shop started way back in the day when you guys were asking, can we get shirts? And I built it at like 3 a.m. on Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like the Lawnard Shop or Chamberlain Coffee and Rare Beauty. And when I said I built the Lawnard Shop at like 3 a.m., it's because they have hundreds of ready-to-use templates that make it really easy to design your shop so it doesn't feel like a template, but also you're not gonna mess anything up, which is always what I'm worried about when I'm doing things myself. And they have award-winning customer service there, just in case you're not sure. And Shopify integrates directly into social media selling. So when you click through to the Lawnard Shop on YouTube, that's all powered by Shopify. And they have the Shop Pay button that integrates into every shop, which as a shopper, I love. And I realize how many of the places I'm shopping are Shopify sites because I can just hit Shop Pay, it's getting right to me, and I absolutely love it. So Lawnard, to see less abandoned carts and more sales, now is the time for Shopify and their Shop Pay button. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/Lawnard. Just head to shopify.com/Lawnard to start hearing this soon. That's shopify.com/Lawnard. Now let's get back to today's episode.
You know, there's another thing that was hearsay, but I think it's important. Remember the talk about Carmen and sort of the weight that I assigned her based upon the phone contacts with Kouri. It's also important to know that Carmen was close. Carmen liked Eric. Carmen was close to him and the boys. And when Carmen was a no-show at the funeral, her absence was conspicuous. And I considered that possible evidence of consciousness of guilt.
Right.
That did not come up, but that was an important cue for me to go to the police and say, hundreds and hundreds of messages. Kouri can't remember the name of her new house cleaner because she's brand new, because Norma replaced Carmen. But
Carmen had been there up through Eric passing.
I don't know.
Right close in time.
I think it was shortly before, is my recollection. Mm-hmm. You probably know this moment, which as a professional, you can look up on a public website, sort of somebody's criminal record history. And I looked at Carmen's and I kind of went like, oh, hey, there's so many docket entries for her. It was multiple pages, just listing the case number.
Right.
And I was like, well, we got hundreds of messages. She's conspicuously absent from the funeral, and she's got a record longer than both my arms. So
yeah,
go talk to her, because they're certainly in a more powerful position than I am to go talk with her. I never spoke to Carmen, never once. She was preserved for the state's witness, and she told them what she told them, and I had nothing to do with that. But it was pivotal. I don't think this
case
Did you
watch Carmen's
would have happened
testimony?
without her. I did.
Yeah. And I felt, and I mean, you and I have talked to a lot of people, you more than me as a prosecutor, because you have more access to people as you are on the defense side. But there was a genuine, for me, heaviness to her testimony of sorrow, deep sorrow and regret that came across in everything that she said. Yeah,
and I thought the defense's cross only made her more relatable and likable to the jury.
You had GPS tracked cars that you thought might belong to Carmen and then determined didn't belong to Carmen. So those were terminated. Those didn't belong to her. No big deal. But you were also tracking Kouri, and you were tracking vehicles connected to Kouri's mother, one of which she was letting Kouri's brother Ronnie use. And the audience might be familiar with mom and brother because they were recently on 2020, which we'll get to. But you were tracking a number of vehicles, and you're allowed to do so through the state of Utah, through being a PI. There are rules to go about and get approval for that. And then you did. What period of time was this? And then why? Because I don't think she ever asked what period of time you were tracking. It was obviously before the arrest because it was Kouri, but do you recall what period of time this was happening?
Yeah, it would have been in the summer of 22.
Okay.
Started in May. And as I said on the stand, there are different times for different vehicles. I don't think it will surprise you that I was interested in Kouri's travel most significantly. But the reason, and of course, Lisa, her mom, was at the residence on March the 3rd, the last day that Eric Richins was alive. So I had an interest in her. There are other reasons I was interested in Lisa and her role in this. But my situation was that I understood that Eric had died of a massive ingestion of fentanyl. It was more than massive. It was just colossal.
Right.
The amount of fentanyl found in his gastric contents just kills the entire neighborhood of people easily. Yeah. There was ostensibly, and by all reports, only one adult present in that house when that time of ingestion makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Agreed.
Cody, Eric's business partner, and other people could have benefited from Eric's death, which is just a
wild,
crazy. But nobody was there. No adult was there except Kouri. I had reason to fear for the safety of Eric's 3 young sons. I had reason to fear that Kouri would abscond with those boys.
Right.
I had every.
That's a very realistic concern.
It was a very realistic situation. I think I would have been grossly negligent had I not tracked her vehicle and those other vehicles at the time that I did, because I was a Lone Ranger out there. The police were not moving on this case. I was it. There was no cavalry coming and there was no backup available. I needed to be able to know where her patterns and habits were. If that could provide me with additional leads, great. If that could provide me with locations of additional evidence, also great. If that could provide me with associates or other locations, also very good. So you don't take this decision to track just willy-nilly. This is not something that you do in every case. This was as serious as it gets. And so you're damn right I tracked him.
Now, we heard in trial questions about whether or not there were ostensibly go bags with Kouri's passport and travel documents and go bags for the boys.
Yes.
Were you aware of those being at the house?
Oh, yes.
And is that part of what caused you so much concern, that she had bags packed with travel dogs?
That's definitely part of the ingredients in the soup. Those go bags were there. We knew about them. And we were very concerned. Very concerned. And also there were reports that Kouri was showing up at the kids' games with a noticeable odor of alcohol. She was driving her vehicle with alcohol on board.
That's concerning.
This not unusual for people to self-medicate with alcohol in a time of grief, but she was probably in a time of regret, perhaps, and she was using alcohol. And we were very concerned about the safety of the boys. Nothing else in this case really matters but their safety. In the end,
Absolutely.
in the final analysis, that's all that really matters. The defense war cry, "There's no fentanyl found in the house," is a terrible idea. It's very bad. It's what gave me the strongest suspicion that it had been Kouri that did this, because she was the only one who could have manipulated the crime scene to clean up so that there would be no trace of fentanyl in the house. I couldn't believe that the defense was still making this argument. At the end of this case, they never found any fentanyl. Well, guess why? She manipulated it out of that scene so that you couldn't find it. Duh.
When did you find out that Josh Grossman's phones were repaired and that texts were recovered from them in your investigation of this case? It would have been after Kouri was arrested, obviously, but how did that all go down?
So he contacted my clients, and he was immediately referred to me, and I spoke with him that same day that he had made contact. What I knew was that he was contacting me because he felt guilt with regards to the relationship that had now long since soured.
Shocking.
What I needed to determine was whether that was all. I needed to know whether he felt guilty because he took part or had knowledge of this homicide. And so talking with Josh Grossman is never less than a 90-minute affair, guaranteed. It's a long conversation. At some point, I do say to Josh, well, I'm convinced she murdered him. Tell me what you think about that. This is where the rubber meets the road on that admonition the judge keeps giving the jury. I'm not offering it for the truth. I want to see the effect upon the listener. I want to hear
what do you do with that info?
Right. I want to hear what he says to me right after I drop that on him. That's an important investigative technique. And I want to see his reaction to that, because it's going to tell me whether or not he feels guilt about the homicide, not just the guilt about the affair. And his answers are consistent with what I finally conclude is that he did not have prior knowledge. I don't think, at least as far as I can tell. He did have some suspect conversations with her after that, which the jury heard about. And
they did.
Her choice of words, again, it's her words, poisoning, murder.
Yeah.
These are
Killed.
These are not words that a grieving widow uses. Sorry, they're not.
Not unless they're talking about what somebody else did, not about themselves. But I think what's important to highlight about Grossman is that he reached out to Eric's family, it sounds like out of guilt for the affair, after Kouri was arrested, though.
No, there was one contact just prior, and then there was additional contact that I had with him after her arrest.
Okay.
And I, in the very first one, I determined that those phones were non-functional. And your question was, when did I learn that they'd been recovered? Not until much after they were, because that was a process that I had recommended to them or whatever, that I handed Grossman off to the sheriff's office, and they were in charge of collecting the devices. I never did any of that. I just handed him off to the sheriff's office, and they took control of that. But I've certainly repaired a lot of broken iPhones in my day. And we're very grateful for those because A, they're intact, and B, they're tamper-proof. Nobody can be deleting stuff like Kouri did. You can't be tampering with that. We're using different techniques to get those off of the phone than is traditional. So
there was contact with the Richins prior to her being arrested. Was it the book that was the trigger then? Because in his testimony, he conflated the two.
Yeah. I think it probably was. I mean, I could look up the exact dates, but one was definitely before and her arrest and after. And I think that's also what prompted my comment to him that she murdered him, because she'd been arrested for murder.
Right.
That's
really what I was getting at, was the comment. it's not giving him new information
It's not.
if it's after she's been arrested for murder, because the only thing that was charged later was the attempt. And I wonder how much getting Grossman's phones helped them charge the attempt, knowing that she's with him, because it seemed to me on the outside she was using Grossman in that day as an alibi that she could set up to fall, because she didn't really care all that much what happened to him. It was convenient.
I thought her conduct on that day spoke loud volumes about what was going on. And that just her non-reaction, her non-travel back home, I thought that was all very suspect. And consider that this is her getting better at doing this. She understands that you can no longer just spread it on a sandwich that is not guaranteed to deliver the full dosage, because he likely took a bite or two, had this reaction in his mouth, and went for the EpiPen and some Benadryl. When you solubilize it and throw it back, as in a shot, or put it in a squirt bottle like you have on a bicycle, for example, that once you realize it tastes bad, it's too late. It's already in your stomach. It's too late. And
with lemon drop or ginger beer, you've got some strong flavors that are in there.
It's going to mask
competing.
There's
it's
going to mask
flavor.
the flavor. But even if you know that it tastes terrible, it's too late. You can't do anything about that. That's a soluble liquid.
Absolutely.
Even if you force vomiting in that situation, you're still going to have a lot of absorption through the stomach lining.
One of the jaw-dropping moments for me of your cross-examination was that Kouri Richins thought it was a good idea to pick up the phone and call you. In January of 2023, she called you.
Yes.
Well, the defense kept trying to stop you. Nestor was saying, stop, don't say anything more. She asked about it because she seemed to insinuate that Kouri was trying to tell her side. You can't talk to her because she's represented by counsel.
Yeah.
But what went down, if you can share?
Well, I mean, I can elaborate just a little bit on what I said on the cross-examination.
Yes,
so, I had been conducting interviews in January 23, and I think that it was either the 18th or that day, the 19th, I spoke to one of her closest business associates. Now, keep in mind that an investigation, when you have a subject, that's the center of a circle. Kouri is the center of a circle that I'm drawing in my mind. And there's business associates.
Oh, no, that's you just being obsessed with her, Todd.
Yeah, right.
All eyes on me in the middle of a ring, just like a circus. Yes, Kouri's the middle, and all the spokes go out.
So the business associates are kind of in the outer ring, and the family and the friends are kind of on this inner ring. And I want to get to as many of those spokes in the wheel as I can before I get to the hub, before I get to the center point. Because I will know if that subject is lying to me or not, based upon the answers I've already gotten from everybody around them. And it also does have the effect of ratcheting up the pressure a little bit. I'll admit that. Someone is circling, you pay attention. And I touched a nerve with this particular business associate. She calls me. She is hot and heavy. She is angry. She is saying something to the effect of, I'm right here. You can come talk to me anytime. I'm right over here, is what I recall. And I saw your commentary on this, and you opined that she may be calling me to call me a motherfucker. And I believe you are correct. I believe you read that situation 2020. You got that right on, EDB. She was calling to say that I was a motherfucker. She called me an idiotic private investigator in an email once, or maybe it was just stupid or something like that, but it was in an email to the police.
Idiot seems to be a word she likes a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, she was ready to talk. And I, as I said in my cross, I can't talk to you. I'd love to talk to you. Let's set some time to talk. I need to talk with your lawyer first. That was it.
Because you're an arm of the lawyers for your client. And so speaking to a represented party is inappropriate. Even if they call you, it doesn't make it less inappropriate.
It doesn't matter because my ethics are to the lawyers I work for.
Yes.
And they can't ethically let her in their office, even if she says, I don't want my lawyers here. I want to talk to you. They still can't do it. It's not ethical, right? I think, first of all, it may be that Kouri forgot to tell them about that. I think that's entirely possible. I think she was looking for an answer that was, no, I never talked to your client. Oh, you mean in all of those years, you never decided to talk with my client? Well, I absolutely wanted to speak with her. And I told her counsel at the time that we should definitely set up an interview, because that's why she called me. She said, I'm right over here. You can come talk to me anytime. And I'm like, great, let's do it. When? Never got an answer. Didn't surprise me that I never got an answer.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
Her lawyer got a hold of her and went, you stop this immediately. And this is my speculation, of course, but any lawyer would. And every time we've seen a high profile case I've covered where the lawyer walks their client into the police station and is like, client, sit down and talk, all the lawyers are sitting there going, why are you doing that? Don't do that. Don't let your client talk to anybody.
Kouri convicts herself. She makes these recordings. She writes these letters, the walk the dog letter. This is just damaging. Some jurors thought it was more damaging than others, but nobody thought it was helpful.
That's very true.
It did not help her. And then, once again, Kouri Darden's words convict Kouri. It's not me. I'm not setting anybody up. I'm not planting any evidence. Kouri's words, Kouri's deeds, that's what got her here.
Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.